Today we're heading to Fogo Island for a show in the community of Tilting. We first came to Fogo Island to play the Brimstone Head Folk Festival, a place where musicians of all kinds get together to share their music. We visited the festival and the island many times since then, and we always love returning. My name is Mark Manning, and I play with the band Rum Ragged. For over a decade now, we have been collecting songs and tunes from around Newfoundland and Labrador that have been passed from person to person for generations. Now we're visiting some of the communities where we learn the music and some of the singers and players who help keep it alive. There's so much more to hear. The communities all around Fogo Island are full of some of the best musicians and storytellers. After soundcheck and Tilting, we couldn't pass up the chance to visit Jobat's Arm, to sit down at the Kelly family home and chat with some folks who have a long family history of great musicianship, storytelling, and dancing.
And old Fogo I'm leaving behind. Our back leaves this harbour tomorrow.
My name is Ron Kelly, and my son Robert Kelly is here with me. And we're from Jobat's Arm, and this is our homestead. It's probably 200 years old. This is where we grew up. There was 10 of us.
What's your earliest memories of music here in Fogo?
Just in the neighborhood here alone, we had a bunch of accordion players.
Brent
Tobin would stand out in my mind. He would come here on Saturday nights, and my father was a great dancer, step dancer.
Grandfather was a great entertainer. Like if he lived in New York or something, he would have ended up on Broadway. He was an amazing dancer, and back then they used to have competitions, and he was only tied once and it was a woman from Gander Bay, I think it was, the story goes, was the only person that he was never beaten, but he was tied with a woman from Gander Bay who came from Gander Bay to challenge him to a dance up in Tilting one time.
He was a step dancer,
yeah.
And he could tribble, he could tribble
he could triple his feet.
The stuff, and do all that stuff, And he could recite too. He did a lot of Robert Service and stuff, And but Bryn would come over with his accordion, but he was a fantastic accordion player. And then they would have the dances down in the old hall, the square dances. Yeah. And I'd go to them. I was a child, and to go, and that really caught me.
Myself and our bandmate Zach first started playing the traditional music of Newfoundland and Labrador in an accordion group based heavily on the Fogo Island Accordion Group. Aaron has learned a lot of tunes from old tape recordings of fantastic Fogo Island players like Brent Tobin.
But he was grandfather's best friend. Where grandfather was a great entertainer, he'd sit down and he'd do a recitation that would be 20 minutes long. And recite every single word, word.
Well, he wouldn't just sit down there. He would get up and
act it
out, on the middle of the floor right here.
And there'd be people here, so the oldest people would be sat around the table, and then the next generation would be around them, and then the younger crowd would be out in this part of the house, kind of listening in, which you used to call getting your goggly. Right, so the young crowd were out getting their goggly, right? That meant that they were having to listen in on the old crowd. But there's a great story of Grandfather Kelly was up at the hall, and he would go out and he would sit down with an accordion, but he would hold in on the air button, right, and pretend to be playing, when the whole time it was Brent Tobin behind the curtain, right? But he'd stand up, he'd go to hell with it. He'd stand up and he'd start dancing, and over the wall he was playing the accordion. And for years and years and years, people thought that grandfather was an amazing accordion player, right? But he never played accordion. It was just a big joke.
And then I had an uncle in Tilting, Philip Foley, who gathered up a lot of songs in his day, and Figgy Duff did a lot of his stuff.
And you guys did one as well.
Yeah. So that was my Uncle Philip Foley, you know. He kind of influenced me as well. I started wanting to play, you know, and I have this friend just down the road. His name is Hayward. He was a little older than me, and he started teaching me a few chords here and there, you know. I'm still not a great guitar player by any means, but I knew I wanted to do something with it. Then I ended up in St. John's 23 years ago, and I started playing with, you know, with the home and the music for sure, you know.
Yeah.
And I was very happy with that, you know.
It all kind of started here in this house, though, huh?
But it all started here. Every Sunday when we were children, we'd come here for dinner. Okay, all our friends and neighbours would come here, and myself and Greg played piano, I played guitar, and we'd have a session. My mother would sit up and she would have her knitting and stuff, and we sang for hours and hours on Sunday afternoon, you know.
Our focus of a lot of what we do with the band is traditional music, and there's a lot of traditional music in Fogo, and stuff that was handed down from, you know, people who settled here and handed it down to people generations past.
Yes.
There's a lot of people in Fogo. I found everybody I met from Fogo is creative, like a very creative bunch. And poets here, because I mean, even like the Jobat and Longliners.
Yes, and that song was written by Frank DeWar,
Right.
from Tilting, back in the early 70s. And he talked about, because Jobat's Arm at the time was a haven for all the boats on the northeast coast of Newfoundland. It wasn't just Jobat's Arm.
Right.
But they were called the Jobat's Arm Longliners. They all fished off here in the Green Bay. And they were from everywhere, as far as east of St. John's and north to St. Anthony.
Right.
But they'd all tie up here.
So the Jobat's Arm Longliners weren't Longliners specifically from Jobat's.
No.
They were from everywhere.
So he wrote this song, and I remember he was an elderly man. He lived here for years, but he moved to Montreal. And then he moved back after he retired from what he was doing. And he said to me one day, because I was getting on the go with music and stuff, he said, maybe you would like to sing this song, you know, the Jobat's Arm Longliners. And I never paid much attention to it. I had it for years and never done anything with it. And there was no music to it. He just, you know, wrote it all down. Mm-hmm. So myself and Greg, my brother Greg, we got together, and I was going to record. That was in 97. Back in 1997, I was doing an album with Middle Tickle. That's the original band. And Greg came up one evening, and like that, he captured the music, and we went in, we recorded. And you know what? After the album was done, we did some extra songs. I didn't want to put that on the album.
Go on.
No.
We were down in the basement, right? And Anne shouted out. She could hear the conversation we were having down in the studio. And she said, "Don't be a fool," she said, "put that on the album."
That's fun.
There's Gilbert in the stubble, she's loaded down with skates. And Justin in the Endeavour, with Billy Burke his mate. With their hardy crews and captains, they're the finest fishermen. And the girls are all excited, the Longliners are coming in. The other piece of the puzzle behind Jobat's Arm Longliners is Ron's brother and bandmate, Greg Kelly.
What would be some of your earliest memories here of music?
I was thinking about something the other day. I never had an air guitar, and Ron had an acoustic guitar. She was small, but she was really nice to play. So Ron would never let me use her. And so anyway, when he'd go up to Fogo in the nighttime to date Patsy, my mother would say, "Now, this is your chance, right?" And go upstairs. And Ron never had her in a case. He'd just have her laid underneath the bed on the floor. So I'd go up, and this is where I learned a lot of my stuff. And you know, and that was a whole long time ago. You're talking about, about 40 odd years.
I don't know if Greg is left-handed, right?
50 years ago, no.
Right.
And he learned how to play right-handed. Because we only had the one
Yeah,
guitar.
that's right.
So we only had the one guitar. So he learned how to play right-handed, like I would play.
So this would be the beginnings of Middle Tickle, I suppose.
So and then that started up. Then when Greg he was only like 10 years old, and I was 20, you know. But anyway, he ended up playing and very good. He, much better player than I am for sure, you know. So I said, "Oh, there's something there. There's definitely something there on the go, you know.
And we talked on it earlier too, the Jobat's Arm Longliners song. I mean, being here in Jobat's Arm, a big thing that myself and Aaron have noticed, you get traditional songs handed down to you, you get traditional tunes handed down to you, but there's poetry and written word and prose of different kinds that get passed along to you and say, turn that into a song or something, but it doesn't have music with it. Or,
Yes, Ron came up with the air for that
I
song.
came up with the ear, but I couldn't play it.
But he,
Suppose you hum it for Greg and he played it.
So I got him up, like,
we're
this is true.
at the time I was playing about I'm playing 5 different instruments now. It was the first time that I ever went into the studio and did any kind of work like that. It was all new for me. So I came up with the opening for that song. Do 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 do. So anyway, I took it from there, and then we started building it, and it turned out a whole lot better than I thought it would.
Great track, by yeah.
and a piece of writing that spoke so well to exactly what happened here, right in front of your window. You know, like Arm Longliners coming in, you grow up with all your life.
When he came to me and said, like, would you consider doing this, you know, and like I said earlier, and I said, well, I'll take it. Like we were just saying, people hand you off songs, right?
Yeah.
I have a bunch of them home.
Wow.
And they never got no music to them, right? There's a bunch of lyrics, right?
Yeah.
And anyway, I managed to come up with a tune for that. Anyway, the Jobat's Longliners. People hand me songs every day. I just got one last week from a guy from down around Burgeo.
Yeah.
And I said, you got an ear for it, you know? Like, no, he says. And it was like 16 verses or something.
I love, like, I mean, the Jobat's Arm Longliners, I did it, I did a lot of work on that song, but it was enjoyable work.
Well, you did a lot of work on the album, Greg, I mean.
But I still love to hear other people doing their own renditions of it.
Right.
I like that. There's something about that.
Well, it obviously resonates with a lot of different artists, right?
Yeah.
There's been so many covers of that song.
Yeah.
Oh
over the
my
years,
God,
right?
there is.
Me mother said it was naughty, I should take some good advice. I said if it's naughty, sure it's also very nice. On Monday I met Mary Ann, and Tuesday Mary Jane. Wednesday I met Miss McCann, and Thursday